Hey everybody, Eric here, and I am so incredibly sorry that it has been a few weeks since I got a video up. I have been incredibly busy. Most people know that watch the channel. I'm into the real estate thing. I've been trying to do some residential deals, but they're not out there. And so I switched to a commercial deal and got a commercial building. I just closed on it, and I'm trying to make it operate just like my Airbnbs, which is fully electronic and automated and just, yeah. Another video. We'll talk about that later. But in the process, and also playing with my Starlink stuff, which is, by the way, is getting better, I'm shopping for internet for the building, and I want to make sure that it's got multiple connections for redundancy. And then we had a huge fiber cut in this area this past weekend, and we're down for 18 hours on the main provider. And so it got me thinking, when I was shopping for alternatives, and maybe I throw Starlink on there, but speed tests. I think that Speedtest could be the biggest fraud put on the American public, and everybody believes it, and they don't even know it. And I really wanted to dig into it, and so more people need to know about this and what's going on, because they have a false sense of what they're really getting and what they're paying for. And this all started when I was going down the rabbit hole and shopping for a backup business connection for this particular location. And CenturyLink has a connection. It's only 60 meg, but for backup, I was like, okay. But then I started thinking, 60 meg, up to 60 meg. Most of the providers say up to. And that's what gets you, is because for the longest time, you would never get the up to amount. But over the last couple of years, you miraculously get the up to amount and sometimes over. And how do you determine that? Well, of course, a speed test. But the way they work is really kind of a fraud, and there's some serious problems. So to kind of get where we got here and how this all happened, we got to go back to early 2000s. And, we're talking, most people had that awful noise, the dial-up noise, and everybody had the same connection speed. You either had a 56K modem or a 33.6 modem, and they operated, that was the bottleneck. They operated at those speeds, maybe a little less with overhead, and that was it. And then there was this whole broadband thing that they started pushing. Mainly DSLs and cable companies were pushing it, and they said, oh, well, we'll get you always connected. And that sounds great, but the price was way more than your $19.99 dial-up was. And so getting people to understand why they had to move to a dial-up based, from a dial-up based system to a broadband based system, took a lot of convincing. And, yes, it's on all the time. You're not stamping on people's phone lines and things like that. But then it was faster. And so they started offering these connections, and the only way you could really tell that it was faster and that it was working, because, at this time period, most things were web pages, and, it took 4 hours to download an MP3. That was the kind of world it was in. So for most people to know that it was working and it was doing better, they would do a speed test. And basically, a speed test is just downloading a big file and calculating how long it takes you to get to it, and bam, there's your speed test. The problem was, in the early days of this, they were hosted in data centers and on servers and things like that. And so almost everybody's speed test was awful. And people would call up their internet provider all the time saying, I'm not getting the speeds I'm paying for. And that's because the servers were so far away, and they were where your websites were hosted, and it was real. Well, people don't like real. They want to know that they're getting what they're paying for. And this has created a huge problem. And networks have seriously evolved now. And now you've got gigablast and gigabit connections and all these other things that would have cost thousands of dollars a month just, 10 years ago. And they're offering these things for $60 to $100 a month kind of thing. How did things get so cheap? I know technology gets cheaper, but how did it get that cheap, and how are they doing this? And the dirty little secret is they're not. They are providing gigabit or these really fast connections in what we call the last mile. And the last mile is between your house and your cable modem, your DSL, whatever it is, and the internet provider's main hub. And so their network is super fast. So from my house to the neighbor's house that's on the same internet provider, we can talk super fast at all the promised speeds. But where it really gets hairy is the connections to the internet. Now, if I bought a gig of internet and my neighbor bought a gig of internet and 8 other people on the street bought a gig of internet, they would have to supply 10 gig of internet. And they're like, well, wait a minute, that costs a lot of money to buy real internet at 10 gig, and it's not feasible. So they share it out, and they assume that I'm not going to be using it at the same time as my neighbors are going to use it, and they came up with a formula. Back in the old days, we used to have a 1 to 10 formula. For every meg that we had sold, and this was when I worked for ISPs, for every meg that we had sold, for every 10 megs, I say, we bought one. And with broadband, it's even over leveraged. And the problem is, though, when kids get home at 3 o'clock from school, or everybody gets home from work, all 10 of us are trying to get internet access at the same time, and it goes whoosh. And it's not necessarily because we're all using what's in the local network and overwhelming it. It's because we're overloading that oversubscribed value between the internet provider's network and the actual internet. So to get to AWS or Netflix or something like that, that's the real internet. It's not hosted locally. And so people would complain all of the time, my internet's so slow, my speed test said this, and blah, 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 I'm not getting what I'm paying for, I want a credit, it's not working. And at the end of the day, how well it worked or streamed or performed didn't matter. It was about what your speed test says. And so the internet providers got really creative, and they said, well, we can't afford to give everybody the same pipe that we're selling them to the actual internet. It doesn't make economic sense. They can only make money if they oversubscribe their links to the internet and what they're buying. And this is just economics 101, and I get it, and I understand it. But they're selling these super fast connections, and their customers want those super fast connections. So the internet providers got smart, and they're like, well, wait a minute. Maybe I can partner with these speed test sites, and we'll give them a free host at our place. Well, now when you go to say something like speedtest.net, it'll go through a detecting process and say, I'm going to find your closest server. And it happens that your closest server is only a couple of miles away at the internet provider's headquarters. Well, guess what? That network is super fast, more than what I'm paying for there. And I like the result. But in reality, that's not the speeds I have to the internet. And when you're talking about cloud gaming, when you're talking about cloud streaming, Netflix, even voice over IP, those things don't live at your ISP. They live out in the internet. And so if those pipes are not good enough, then the stuff doesn't work. You have choppy video, you have bad phone calls, you have bad video gameplay. All of this stuff is real. And the internet providers are like, well, look, the speed test looks good to me, so you're fine. That is where what you see is not real. And a lot of people believe it. It's not gospel. And bandwidth doesn't mean anything. It's about how fast you can download that one file. But if you've got a proper network set up, it's making sure that can be shared out in balance. That's where SD-WAN comes in, and traffic prioritization and QoS. There's a lot to this. So couple of things I want to leave everybody with. And first of all is that not Amazon, but Netflix came up with a solution because so many people complained that Netflix weren't working, but their speed tests were amazing. And what that is fast.com. And what that does is it tests it out to the actual internet, like where the movies are being hosted. And they try really hard to get those as close to you as possible, but they can't get it on the internet provider's network because they want to charge a lot for that. So good reality to see what your real internet speeds are to the actual internet is use fast.com. And there's an upload thing there too if you get more, click on more details. And it'll show you what your true internet streaming speeds are. They also do fancy things like let you burst for a couple of seconds so it fakes out the speed test and then shut it down to like a really slow speed, and it messes with your applications. This is a huge, huge fraud. But people believe it. They feel that if they go to speedtest.net or a random speed test website, that's what they've got. But that's not true. I feel bad for people because they're being misled, but I understand the internet provider's position is they were tired of fielding the phone calls that said, hey, I'm not getting what I'm paying for, come fix it, or give me a credit. And they had a hard time making people understand what was going on. So what do? They faked it. So perception is reality. And the perception is you have a fast connection, exactly what you're paying for. The reality is it's not even close. And I'll leave you with most of the connections that we tested that are being sold by cable providers and DSL providers, say the gigablast or the gigabit level or whatever it may be, gig fiber even, they should have 1 gigabit of transfer speed. but to the actual internet, we're seeing an average of between 200 and 300 megabits per second. And they can regulate this, and that's what software-defined networking is all about. Anyway, I know this was a ramble. I know this was technical, but what you need to know is how it works. And that you may not be getting what you're paying for, and that's because they can't give you what you're paying for because it would cost a fortune. And if you want to know your true speed, use fast.com or something like that to the actual internet, not just the locally hosted speed tests that are out there. And that's going to give you a real view of what you really got. Hopefully this is helpful to somebody and it gives everybody a little bit better understanding of how this stuff works. Stop believing those fake speed tests because they are not real. They're just there to make you feel good. And if this brought you some value and maybe you learned something today, do me a favor and please subscribe, like, and share this channel. Real quick, one last thing is, the thing is on Starlink, I was surprised, their speed test link in their app was fast.com. So they are trying really hard not to deceive people and actually show them what your real speeds are to the internet, and they're impressive. So anyway, something to note. Please, again, like, share, subscribe, and hopefully you tune in with me for the next video. Thank you, and have a good day.